Okay, everyone. This week we're going to talk about the beginning of the Renaissance. So we're looking at really the early 1400s is what we're talking about today into the 1500s. And we have two areas that we'll be focusing on. We have the northern area of the Renaissance, which I'm showing you here. And then we'll have the area of Italy, the Italian Renaissance. So first, the Northern Renaissance, because some of these names you might not be familiar with and you might not know where they are. Holland is still Holland, so you probably hopefully know where that is. And Luxembourg is still Luxembourg. But when we say like Flanders, that doesn't exist anymore, really, as an area that you would probably recognize. Or Burgundy, okay, so if you know wine, there's Burgundy wine, but do you really know where it is in the kingdom, what would be the kingdom of France at the time, and is a section of France today? Okay, so up here we have our borders between the kingdom of France and the German Empire. It goes like this red line, and so you can see that this whole section would be considered France. This is going to be part of the German Empire, so very different than what it would be today. So the Northern Renaissance. The first piece of art we're looking at today is by the Limburg brothers. These were three brothers. They were from a family of silversmiths, and they had been trained as silversmiths, but then they branch out and they also start to do painting. And their most famous piece is a calendar that they created for the Duke of Berry, and this is the month of February that I'm showing you. And they represent a transitional time in art, a transition from the Gothic into the early Renaissance. So let me go walk you through this and show you why that is. So it's a calendar. So we have the astrological signs up here. I'm Pisces, so I recognize this one right away. This is the fish for Pisces. Has this really beautiful blue, ultramarine. And remember, blue is the most expensive color paint. So this was rather expensive to do these blue sections. And then because February is cold in Northern Europe, they have snow on the ground. And then you can see the church back here in the background and the town. And we'll see that the church plays less and less of a role as we move further and further into the Renaissance. The church no longer has this really strong hold on people like it did in the Middle Ages, the Romanesque period and the Gothic period, right? We have our peasants here, and just the fact that they're showing peasants, again, this is something that we wouldn't have seen before, except in the very end of the Gothic period and moving into what we consider the Renaissance. And so we have our peasant here who's walking on this road, and you see there's a sense of perspective here, because here, well, these people are the biggest, and then these get smaller and smaller back into the village here. And there's this line in the snow that really leads your eye back into that village. And then we have this little town set up down here. The perspective of how the building is drawn is not correct, but it's fairly believable that we can see like there's space in this house. But this house is really what is the most striking thing that makes this still linked to the Gothic period, because it looks like a dollhouse. It looks like the side of the building has been removed so we can see into it. That is not realistic. So we don't have walls that are removed and we're able to view into it. So this is really more of a Gothic, depiction of a house. We have our peasants here warming themselves by the fire, and birds outside eating and stuff. And we are kind of, for the most part, looking down on the scene. So the perspective is much more believable, not really exactly correct yet. But again, this is this transitional period. So in Flanders, let's go back here. Here is Flanders. We have a group of painters, I should say, that come together and really start a movement. So this is the first piece that I'll show you. We're not actually sure who painted this. It's not signed, and there are a couple people that it could be credited to. But it's called a triptych, meaning it's 3 paintings. So 1, 2, 3. And the paintings are hinged here. So these 2 panels actually fold, and they have paintings, another painting on the back of them. This is in New York City at the Cloister Museum, which is the upper part of Manhattan. Really amazing museum if you ever get to go there. So let's look at the first panel in this. This is the Annunciation scene. We'll see this a lot. So here, this is when the angel Gabriel comes to Mary and says, hey, you're going to have the Son of God. And so that is what's happening in this scene. So the way the material is painted is quite beautiful. The thing about the Northern early Renaissance is this extreme amount of detail that is shown in drapery and other things like that, like, you know, the hair and stuff. What is not done correctly is perspective. So, for example, this table, it looks like it's flipping up, and the book and the candle and everything are going to slide off of the table. The bench, too, is not done correctly. It looks like it might flip up some. But if you watch, I think I have a video up on this one, the reflection on this is really, really beautifully done. The light doesn't quite make sense, but it still is very nicely done. The other thing that we see is it looks architecturally and time-wise like it's set in the time period of when it was painted, the 1400s. So that's a strange thing. We could say that that's anachronistic, meaning that it's out of time sequence. It's like if you have somebody in 2021 walking around in Victorian dress, it wouldn't look quite right, right? They're out of their time sequence of when they should be dressed that way. If we look in this panel, here we have Joseph, who's the husband of Mary, and he was a carpenter. So he's shown in his workshop working on wood here. The same with the table. It's flipping up, so it would look like everything is falling off the table. So the perspective is not done correctly. And then if we look outside the window here, it looks like Flanders in the 1400s. So we have this biblical story now that's taking place in the 1400s. So anachronistic again, out of its time sequence here. And then in the last panel, we have our devoted people. They're on bended knee. They're literally like crawling because they're coming upon the scene of the Annunciation, and they're so taken and moved by what they're witnessing. Notice how if he were to stand up, you know, these figures were all to stand up. They don't really match size-wise. In fact, Joseph looks extremely tiny compared to everybody else, right? He's dressed and she's dressed as though they're in the 1400s. So, and they're in an architectural setting like they're in the 1400s. So again, very strange in its time sequencing here between these 3 paintings. And this is something we'll see again and again as we move forward. And one thing it does, though, is if you're viewing this painting, then you maybe have a stronger connection to the story in this painting because it is placed or set in the time in which you are living. So another painting here, we think it was painted by either Jan or Herbert van Eyck. And these were brothers who were painters. We're not sure which one of them painted it, but we're pretty sure it was by one of them. And so this is a triptych as well. We're looking at it closed at the moment, and you'll see that the painting itself is quite somber, brown, earthy kind of tones in it. And when we then open it, you'll see right away, hopefully, that it's much brighter. Well, the triptych was placed in a cathedral, and it would have been opened for masses or on high holy days. So there's a sense of this, connection, this brightness, jubilee kind of thing, because it's associated with the mass. We have our, Adam and Eve here, different biblical stories that are taking place. We have God and Mary and Jesus. And then again, it's like you have these different scenes down here, but they are taking place within the 1400s. And the perspective on this one is a little strange, the way you're kind of like a bird's eye view flying above, looking down. Then the next painting I want to look at, I have a video up on this one because the meaning of this painting has actually changed over time. And when I learned it about that maybe these two people were married or getting married, and this is a painting that was painted on their wedding day, and I learned all of this kind of stuff. And now we really question that interpretation of this painting. A couple of things hold true though. These two people, they were merchants, and he was a very wealthy merchant. They're dressed in very high fashion for the day. She is not pregnant, although she looks pregnant. This was the fashion of the day, was to have all this material kind of bustled around you, big hoop kind of, no, or not hoop, but a giant skirt of material. The dog is indicating fidelity, so they are faithful to one another. And it's odd that they're in a bedroom, but in our perspective. But during this time period, it was quite common for people to entertain. Instead of like a parlor, you would have your guests come and sit on a couch or something in a bedroom quarters. The oranges on the window, the fruit over here, are perhaps the fruit that he was trading. He was perhaps trading fruit from Northern Africa or the Middle East, and this is how he was making his money. The most amazing thing though is in the background here, we have the signature of the artist on the wall, Jan van Eyck, and below it we have this mirror, and the mirror is actually the reflection of these two people, and it's quite amazingly done. And then we have these little paintings in each of these small circles, and then in addition to that you have this amazing chandelier with the reflections, one candle burning. It's all of this has these meanings, this significance to it, and what we might be able to call then iconography. Iconography is like icons. We learned what that is, right? So icons, but icons in a way this time, symbols that are telling a story. And the people at this time period would have been able to understand these symbols and read this iconography. So, but I do hope that you go and watch the video that I have up, smart video on this piece.